Albert Bierstadt and the Significance of California Art by Shaheen Madipur. This presentation will go over the significance of California art and will focus on a few selected works and artists. We will also be going over the life of Albert Bierstadt and some of his works. Art of California. Some of the first artists of California were the Native Americans. They focused on basket weaving as an art form that was both functional and spiritual. Pictured on the left is a Ohlone-style basket made with olivella shells and woodpecker feathers. This basket shows the resourcefulness of Native American culture and their belief that everything had a purpose. On the right, we have The Dowry, painted by Grace Carpenter Hudson in 1902. It depicts the importance of baskets in Native American life. Here are two paintings by Maynard Dixon. Dixon uses cubism, which focuses on light and shadow, simplistic forms, and not worrying about rendering too many details. His work showcases the Western lands and the affected people of the Great Depression. Impressionism. Monterey Bay, 1916 by E. Charleston Fortune. Fortune's use of broad strokes and vivid color schemes is reminiscent of the Impressionistic style which arrived on the California art scene at the end of the 19th century. One of my personal favorites, Fortune was praised for her work of the Monterey Bay and use of color and light. The work of the California Impressionist was popular in the Bay Area and Southern California and worked directly from the outdoors and nature. Funk art. The funk art movement represented the free thinking and spirit of California. It utilized humor with an underlying irony to infuse meaning into the artwork. Funk artists often created non-functional and unconventional pieces and included the use of found objects in their creations. Robert Arneson is part of the funk art movement of California. One of my favorite sculptures reviewed, Arneson is an example of the free-thinking and free-spirited persona of the California artist. California murals. This is another form of art that was influential in enticing people to the West. Mural art often depicts day-to-day life and can be used to send messages to promote the economy, agriculture, political activism, culture, and memorials of California. California agriculture, which is situated on Coit Tower in San Francisco, depicts the abundance of the agricultural market in California. This further promotes the economy and advertises growth and expansion. A more current artist located in Southern California is Levi Ponce, whose work is also featured. The significance of California art is representative through a set of ideals: free thinking, a love of the land and the culture, and a hope that seemed inherent in the Western movement. Even as art and its techniques progressed and evolved, the ideals held true. The focus may have changed and the stylistic approaches may differ, but there is an underlying message promoting the land and the spirit of the people, the promise held by California, which continues to draw people from all over. Albert Bierstadt, 1830 to 1902. Albert Bierstadt was born in Germany and immigrated to the United States as a child. Bierstadt was raised in New Bedford, Massachusetts, but later returned to Germany to study painting. Bierstadt, upon deciding on pursuing an art career, began to self-advertise, and by 1850 exhibited 13 of his pieces in Boston. For 3 years later, Bierstadt produced theatrical presentations of American scenery. This would help to spark his interest in the North American topography, which would later become the foundation for his lifelong work. In 1857, Bierstadt opened his first studio to the public, which helped to further his reputation and display his talent. 4 of his major works depicting European landscapes were given reviews by the press. These works were used to establish his reputation as a landscape artist. To the West. In 1857, Bierstadt traveled to the Rocky Mountains during a time when the West was thought to be a dangerous place where an artist may never return alive from. Bierstadt was accompanied in this travel by artist F. S. Frost, who agreed to assist with photography. In 1859, Bierstadt joined a survey party with Colonel Frederick West Lander with the goal of improving routes to the west. Traveling along the Platte River to the Wind River Mountains, Bierstadt decided to remain at this location for several weeks to sketch the native life and mountains. Much of his art during this period was focused on the Native Americans in the area, but he did manage to complete a photographic record of the trip, which he would later use in his paintings. This would become a large collection to include On Platte River, Nebraska Undated, Horse in the Wilderness, Indian Encampment, Shoshone Village. This trip would also produce his first large-scale painting, The Rocky Mountain, Lander's Peak, in 1863. The Hudson River School. After relocating to New York City, Bierstadt took a place at the studio building where he became a spokesman for the American West. Bierstadt was also part of the Hudson River School in New York and drew from many of their ideas and styles. This group began painting along the river and based their style on the realism of the environments, incorporating light and what is often referred to as luminism. Bierstadt debuted his Western works publicly in 1860 and was deemed a success, with commenters applauding his depictions of the mountains and incandescent skies inherent in the Western landscape. In 1863, Bierstadt returned to the West and traveled to Lake Tahoe, San Francisco, and Yosemite. During his time in Tahoe, Bierstadt completed the paintings Immigrants Crossing the Plains and the Oregon Trail. While in San Francisco, Bierstadt met Edward Muybridge, whom he regarded as a great artist. Bierstadt would later use some of Muybridge's photographs as reference for his own paintings. Bierstadt would then move on to Yosemite Valley, where he captured the views of the falls and camping in Yosemite and California redwoods. These paintings are some of his most famous pieces of work worldwide. Once again, seeking the thrill of travel, Bierstadt set off for the West once more in 1871 and remained for 2 years, sketching Yosemite and areas of the Sierra Nevada range. Seen as an accomplished artist in San Francisco, Bierstadt was able to sell many of his paintings to Bay Area art collectors. However, during the 1870s, the demand and interest in the epic landscape began to decline, as did Bierstadt's reputation among artists and critics. Despite the rejection he now received from the art community, Bierstadt continued to sketch his trip to the West as late as 1889. Selected artwork. Valley of the Yosemite, 1864. Bierstadt's Valley of the Yosemite is an imagined reproduction of the frontier, which uses the technique of luminism. The light which appears to brighten the picturesque landscape can be seen as a symbolic depiction of the hope which Bierstadt found inherent in the American frontier. In many ways, Bierstadt utilized his landscapes as a way to depict the notion of manifest destiny, or the belief that the land was a God-given right to American pioneers. In many ways, the Valley of Yosemite is a depiction of Bierstadt's feelings in that moment, rather than a view of the valley, meant to express his idealistic view of the land and the hope of that yet to be discovered. Bierstadt's effective use of atmospheric perspective allows him to show a large expanse of the Yosemite Valley. He utilized the ideals of the Hudson River School by maintaining a darker foreground with the light in the background in order to draw the viewer's eye to a focal point, adding to the depth of the scene. The sunset depicted in the pieces make these techniques especially effective, and though the viewer is drawn to the sunset in the background, this does not take away from the scene as a whole. The Domes of the Yosemite, 1876. Depicting one of the nation's most admired views, this painting was created during a time when Americans were in search of self-discovery and fascination of the Western landscape, inspired the wildness and hope inherent in the Western movement. Bierstadt compressed the valley's features in order to incorporate well-known elements. His emphasis on vertical elements accentuates the scene's soaring heights, reminiscent of a medieval cathedral. Bierstadt's attention to space and light again allow him to show off the expanse of the scene, causing the viewer to feel as though there is a grand depth to the nature of the Yosemite. It is notable that this painting displays more detail, and the objects in the foreground are rendered as though reflecting the light of the midday streaming through the valley, making for a more realistic depiction. Emerald Sea, 1878. Unlike most of his works that are focused on vast landscapes, Emerald Sea features a horizon line much higher and towards the top of the painting. My reasoning is that the focus of this particular piece is the ocean waves themselves. Therefore, using the technique of luminism, Bierstadt depicted the light crashing into the wave as a focal point. It is interesting that rather than focus on the beauty and serenity of the landscape as depicted in paintings of Yosemite, Bierstadt painted a much more tumultuous scene with crashing waves surrounding what appears to be shipwreckage. It is my speculation that Bierstadt was trying to show the dangerousness of the environment that surrounds us, despite our need for adventure and discovery. Choluki, the Yosemite Fall, 1864. This painting depicts the splendor of the Yosemite Falls at the end of the day. Artists are depicted congregating near a grove of trees sketching. The right-hand side of the picture includes a sketching umbrella, a color box, and other objects which Bierstadt took with him on expedition. This painting appears to mix elements, focusing not just on the landscape, but on the place of the explorers and artists within that landscape. In this painting, the viewer's eye is drawn to the base of the waterfall, where the light seems to be brightest. The mountain appears almost to disappear into the haze as it reaches the top of the painting. The significance of Albert Bierstadt. Bierstadt legitimized the Western American landscape in the art world. His passion of showing the people the beauty and magnificence of California landscapes sparked the nation's interest and piqued people's in making the move to the Western lands. Bierstadt was prolific in his work, creating at least 500 known pieces which continue to survive and inspire. Bierstadt is credited as being one of the world's greatest landscape painters. His spiritual beliefs and influences from the Hudson River School pushed him to recreate the beauty of the Western landscape as close to reality as possible to depict what he believed to be God's perfection. The primary, enduring inspiration I have noticed in California art is the love of the land and all that it encompasses. Whether that be a focus on its inhabitants, like the Native Americans, or its places of nature, like Yosemite, or even more current, the celebration of urbanization. There is a sense of wonder, freedom, and liberty, and a desire to be true to oneself. These basic views are depicted by artists in their work as they view the world around them. California artists include a variety of styles and techniques, which, though different, seem to focus around life and culture in California. If you'd like to learn more about Albert Bierstadt or California art, here is a list of links to sources